Hey guys, tonight we're doing something wonderfully slow. You're curled up in your blanket, maybe still hearing the whir of your ceiling fan or the occasional creak of the house settling. But in your mind, you're already drifting, not forward, but way back to a cold stone room in a medieval Irish monastery. There's candlelight flickering on damp walls. A bowl of something mushy and unappetizing oats, maybe, or the ghost of oats sits half-eaten on a wooden table. And the only sound is the soft scratching of a quill pen on parchment tonight. We're reading the marginalia of monks, the sleepy, silly, sassy scribbles they left on the edges of their holy manuscripts. Imagine devoting your whole life to copying the Bible by hand, one letter at a time, only to get to Leviticus and think, you know what? This could really use a cat doodle. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time your clock says as we begin. I bet it's somehow always 11:47 p.m. now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk barefoot through the cloisters. The stone is cold beneath your feet, and there's a faint draft curling around your ankles. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing a psalm in the distance, barely audible, like a memory from someone else's dream. You reach the scriptorium, a chamber lit by one solitary candle, and the gray light of a cloudy morning that hasn't quite committed to being day. A monk, let's call him Brother Seamus, hands you a bowl of porridge. It's lumpy, it's gray, it jiggles slightly when you set it down. You take a bite. It's as if someone tried to describe food to a rock, and then asked the rock to cook. Brother Seamus smiles. It warms the soul, he says. You're not sure about your soul, but your teeth feel colder. You sit down at a long wooden bench, worn smooth by generations of sore monks' elbows. The air smells of ink, candle smoke, and damp wool. There's a heavy manuscript in front of you, open to a page with neat black letters and gold illuminations, but your eyes are drawn to the edge of the page. There, written in a hurried scrawl, is a line that says, "Cold is my hand, my stomach growls, I am alone in this margin." That's your first encounter with marginalia, not the official holy text. No, this is the whisper on the edge, the sigh of a monk who's just had it with this long genealogy from Numbers, and is one flick of the quill away from staging a revolt. Instead, he writes his protest in ink, tiny, passive-aggressive, eternal. You run your fingers along the dry, crackled vellum. These were not rebellious monks, at least not outwardly. They were quiet rebels, internal comedians, sleep-deprived copyists with a limited supply of ink and patience. And they had plenty to say. One page features a neat column of gospel commentary. And then, at the bottom, a single word, UGH. Just that. In Latin, Ugius Maximus, maybe, and above that, a small drawing of a duck and a bishop's mitre. Was that theological? Probably not. But monks weren't robots. They were people, and people living in the 9th century get bored. Especially when their days are measured in chapters and the length of a candle stub. It's hard to appreciate now, in a world where writing is instant and emojis exist. But imagine the weight of writing one word at a time, by hand, quill dipped in ink, stroke by painstaking stroke. And halfway through a psalm, your nose starts to itch, or worse, your ink freezes. Yes, that happened. You find a margin note, the ink is frozen. My fingers are stiff. Why must winter exist? Same energy as a teenager tweeting from under 5 blankets. And the candlelight. That's no vibe, it's a threat. One gust of wind, and suddenly you've smeared 5 hours of calligraphy with your sleeve. You spot another note. I smudged again. May the angels forgive my blot. A holy apology, delivered with very human frustration. There's something quietly revolutionary about all this. The monks were tasked with preserving the divine word, yes, but in between, they preserved their own humanness. Their doubts, their irritation, their jokes, their snack cravings. One page literally has "send cheese," and underneath, perhaps a reply, "We are out." Theologians argue about whether these responses were part of official dialogue or later additions. Some suspect the monks might have written back and forth across centuries. Others say they were just talking to themselves. Modern scholars are still debating that, and you're here, gently running your eyes over every speck of ink. Hearing those monks breathe again between the lines, you shift on your bench. The candle crackles. Brother Seamus snores softly behind you. A draft rolls in through the window. You pull your cloak tighter. On the next page, someone has drawn what looks like a fish with legs. Underneath, it tried to walk. It failed. There's a lesson in that somewhere. But for now, you're just warming to the idea that this, too, was history. Not grand speeches or battles, but a cold morning, a bad breakfast, and someone desperately hoping someone else would bring cheese. And that's where we'll leave it for now. But don't get up. Don't turn the lights on. Section 2 is coming. Just stay right there. The next morning, you're still in the scriptorium. Or maybe it's later that same day. Time here is syrupy, slow, thick, and slightly confusing. The candle's shorter now, its puddle of wax creeping closer to the edge of the desk. Brother Seamus is gone, probably off to tend goats or mutter complaints at a rock he believes is sinning. You are alone with the manuscript again, and then you see it, a smudge, a blur of tiny paw prints, trotting boldly across a page of Psalms. Just little inky dots, tiny paws, a perfect trail of mischief. And right next to them, in unusually large letters, written in Irish Latin, Panger did this. I warned him. You laugh out loud, startling the silence. Panger, of course. The monks wrote about him, a beloved cat, kept for companionship and, more practically, for catching mice that dared nibble the holy scrolls. He was famous among scribes. One poem, possibly from the 9th century, is entirely about Panger Ben, the white cat who prowled the monastery like he owned the place you picture. Panger now perched arrogantly on a warm manuscript, tail flicking, completely ignoring centuries of theological nuance. A soft, purring heretic. It wasn't just this Panger. Cats were everywhere in these monastic outposts. Irish scribes didn't just tolerate them, they embraced them. Sometimes BEGRUDGINGLY. Another margin note, written in what looks like annoyed speed. Cat stepped in ink. Ruined Matthew. Underneath, a tiny sketch of a furious monk chasing a blur with a feather. And that's the beauty of these margins. They're not always about God or politics or deep philosophical ponderings. Sometimes, they're just about cats being cats. Which, to be fair, has not changed in 1,000 years. You've never once heard of a cat respecting workspace boundaries. You look closer. This next page is riddled with odd symbols, almost runes. And then you realize they're paw marks too. Just smeared and dragged. A cat must have tried to nap here. Left a tail swipe across Luke 4. Divine feline chaos. And in response, a short, exasperated scribble again. You imagine the monk sighing deeply, eyes closed, counting to 10 in Latin, then just giving in. Because there's only so much you can do when your coworker is a fluffy, judgmental predator who naps on theology. But not all notes are annoyed. Some are affectionate. One scribe added, he watches me work. I feel less alone, and that one stays with you. Because it's cold here and lonely. The work is long. The silence too deep. And sometimes, the only comfort is the sound of a cat's purr vibrating softly beside your hand. As you write about divine suffering, modern scholars still argue about whether this was truly Panger's footprint. Maybe there were many cats. Maybe it was one famous one. Maybe Panger was a nickname for multiple felines through the years. But as you trace the paw prints with your finger, you find yourself not caring. Because the monk believed it was Panger, and that's enough. And isn't that what the margins are for? Not truth, not doctrine, just belief. Whispered from one tired soul to another across centuries. There's something else too. You turn a page and find a poem in the margin, short, rhythmic, maybe a warm-up before tackling a tougher passage, or maybe a secret. It says, the mouse ran free, but Panger sees, no man escapes the cat nor me. A little creepy, sure, but also impressive. This monk was multitasking, scribe, poet, part-time Bond villain. You stretch your fingers, your quill hovers over the page. A whisper of ink drops from the nib, and in that moment you're tempted to write something of your own in the margin. Just a word, a joke, a sigh, a name, but you don't. Not yet. Instead you flip another page, and there's Panger again. This time he's drawn, very poorly, all big eyes and lumpy tail. But the effort is there. The monk tried. Maybe mid-yawn, maybe out of love. Above the sketch, a single line, he caught the mouse. He is proud. He will not shut up about it. You smile. You can hear him, the proud yowl echoing through the cold stone halls, as if catching one skinny mouse makes him Saint Panger of Rodentia. The candle flickers. You lean back, resting your eyes. Your breath is soft. The manuscript smells faintly of dust and fur and something sweet. Maybe old beeswax polish. Or maybe the memory of a monk who once dropped a raisin and decided not to tell anyone. You're not sure how long you've been here, but you're starting to feel something. Comfort, maybe, or closeness. Not just to the monks, to the cats, to the small things that matter. Even when the world is crumbling outside. Because that's the strange secret of these margins. They weren't written during peace. The monasteries were under threat, from raids, from weather, from time. And yet, someone paused mid-sentence to write about Panger, sleeping in a basket, and so you stay, and turn another page, and listen for post-steps in the quiet. Still with me? Good. The next bit's even stranger. There's a note from a monk who really truly hated his pen. The candle sputters again, not in a dramatic thunderclap kind of way, more like a tired sigh. It's still early morning, or, at least, that's what your body tells you. But this monastery doesn't measure time in hours. It measures in tasks. Finish this folio, then the next, then sleep if you can still remember how. You stretch your fingers again. The quill is heavier than it should be. The ink, always a little reluctant, clings stubbornly to the nib. And then you see it, another marginal note, spidery and crooked, as if written while gritting one's teeth. This pen is the devil's own thorn. You grin. There it is. Medieval monks had no chill about their tools, and honestly, who can blame them? The quills were handmade, usually from goose or swan feathers, and had to be trimmed constantly. Every few sentences, you'd have to stop, pull out a tiny knife, and whittle the tip again, and again, and again. You find another line, written with slightly fresher ink. Maybe minutes later, I sharpen, the pen mocks me still. You can feel the despair. This man is one goose feather away from a full monastic meltdown. Sometimes the notes turn personal, petty, beautifully dramatic. My fingers cramp, the pen skips. I shall perish. The monks weren't writing literature, they were living it. You picture Brother Male ISU, his brow furrowed, muttering curses through gritted teeth as his pen refuses, again, to flow smoothly. Maybe he throws it down. Maybe he picks it up with a sigh, like a jilted lover taking one last chance. The next margin proves it. This pen hates me, but I forgive it, for now. And beside it, a tiny angry drawing of what can only be described as a weaponized quill, possibly with teeth. You look up. In the stillness of the scriptorium, you can almost hear the clink of inkwells, the scraping of blades on feather shafts. Writing wasn't a soft, gentle act. It was a battle. And the enemy, half the time, was the equipment. But you know what's amazing? They didn't stop. These monks, gold, cramped, underfed, still wrote. Every line of the Gospels, every twist of Latin syntax, every illuminated capital letter with a golden swirl and a squirrel playing a harp in it. Yes, those exist. Medieval monks were just like that. Still, you sensed the moments when the frustration tipped over. I spilled ink again. Let no one speak of it. That margin smudged black like a guilty secret. This parchment is cursed, like me. Now that's poetry. Scholars have tried to map the patterns of these complaints, by the way. Some believe they increased during the colder months, suggesting that frigid fingers and frozen ink were recurring villains. Others argue it's not about seasons, but mood. That some scribes were just more dramatic. You think about that? About what kind of person chooses to vent silently into the edge of a sacred book, not loudly, not rebelliously, just quietly, privately, in ink. You flip to another page. There, between two columns of finely penned Latin, is a moment of utter resignation. This is the 77th leaf. I have counted. I am so tired. And then, bizarrely, send bread. Was it a joke? A real request? A hallucination born of long hours and no carbs? Who knows? What's clear is this: these margins weren't distractions. They were lifelines. Small whispered signals from one tired brain to maybe the next person who'd read it. Which, you now realize, is you. You smile again. You're sitting where they sat. Not literally, maybe, but close enough. The same rhythm, the same weight in your wrist. The same moments of eye strain and mental drift. And then on the next page, surprise, I wrote this whole page with the wrong ink. May God have mercy. You tilt the page. It's subtle, but yes, the ink tone changes halfway through. Slightly browner, maybe older, maybe from a bad batch. This monk realized it far too late. Did he rewrite the page? No, he did not. Because he was, as the kids say, done. It's comforting. In a strange way, you've messed up digital documents before. Hit send too early, used Comic Sans. But this guy wrote an entire gospel passage in mismatched ink and simply kept going. A legend. But not all mistakes were so subtle. Some monks made their misery art. One margin shows a long arrow pointing to a particularly hard to read line. And beneath, in tiny squashed script, what does this even mean? Was I drunk? You laugh again, quietly, careful not to wake Brother Seamus, who has returned, by the way, and is now asleep on a pile of discarded parchment, using his sleeve as a pillow. He'll be back at it soon, cursing his own pen, carving meaning into stubborn animal skin. You set your quill down, just for a moment, rest your hand, roll your shoulder, and wonder what, if anything, you might write in the margin tonight. Maybe nothing, maybe something silly, maybe just still here, because you are. And next you'll discover what happens when cheese goes bad. Medieval style. You turn the page and something strange happens. Not a vision, exactly. More like a sensation, a shift in air pressure, maybe. A scent, the faintest whiff of something. Cheesy. Yes, cheese. Old sour, slightly damp cheese. You blink. You are still in the scriptorium. The candle is a stub now. Brother Seamus is gone again, off chasing whatever medieval monks chased when they weren't illuminating manuscripts. But the page in front of you is very much still here, and in its margin, written in a tight, nervous hand, is this: let it be known, Brother Cornell fell ill from the cheese. You freeze. That's not the start of a theological debate, that's gossip. This is a dairy-based disaster, and you are here for it. The note continues. He insisted it was fresh. It was not. He paid dearly. It was his second mistake. Wait, second mistake. Naturally, you keep reading. And there it is, a few lines down, slightly fainter. The first mistake was trusting Brother Arnon. Ah, drama in the Abbey. You sit up straighter. This is practically a medieval soap opera. There are no pageantry battles here, no kings, no excommunications, just a very bad wheel of cheese and a friendship destroyed by dairy. Somewhere else in the same folio, someone, possibly Brother Arnon himself, has added in shaky script: the cheese was not cursed, he simply ate too much. And under that, in an even smaller, almost defeated line, it smelled of feet, but I warned no one. You giggle, quietly, respectfully, because this is history too. Forget grand chronicles and sweeping epics. This is the lived experience of men trapped in cold stone buildings with fermented milk and a total absence of modern refrigeration. You think your leftovers are risky? Try unwrapping 6-month-old monastery cheddar stored under a saint's skull, and a prayer. And yet they documented it. Not in the main text, of course. Not between the Psalms or in the Book of Hours. But in the margins, in secret, in ink. There's even a small sketch here. You squint to make it out. Oh no. It's a monk, face contorted, hunched over what appears to be a bucket. His hands are in the air. There are little swirly lines above his head, possibly the earliest known artistic depiction of lactose regret. And beside it, he who turns from the curd shall not be turned. A pun, a theological pun. About cheese. You pause and imagine the moment. The scriptorium is quiet, the candlelight soft, the pages fluttering faintly as the breeze sneaks through stone slits in the wall, and someone snorts into their inkpot at a particularly stupid cheese pun and adds one of their own, because of course they did. Monks were supposed to be serious, solemn, focused on the divine, but you're beginning to realize they were just like you. They got hungry, they got irritated, they gossiped, and when one of them made poor dietary choices, the others immortalized it in the margins of holy texts. A few pages later, you find a curious symbol, a small wedge, triangular, with holes, a visual representation of cheese, perhaps, but then there's an arrow pointing to it and a short line. Beware the small one. It is stronger than it looks. Modern scholars have debated this line for years. Was it metaphorical? A reference to temptation? A warning about pride? Or was it simply literal? Some say it refers to a local blue cheese from the coastal region, legendary for its punch and for causing visions of Mary, both joyful and stern. Others argue it was a joke, one of many. Either way, it's clear that cheese had power, possibly too much power. You keep flipping. The notes continue. Brother Fenton is missing. He went to check the cellar. That was 2 days ago. And if I fall, bury me far from the dairy. And then, the best one, let it be recorded. The cheese one, you can barely breathe. It's ridiculous. It's tragic. It's utterly human. No kings, no armies, just monks, a vat of overambitious camembert, and the eternal struggle to not let lunch kill you. The pages feel warmer now, like they've absorbed the humor, the honesty, the shared moments of ridiculousness across centuries. You realize these weren't just scribbles, they were resistance. Resistance against monotony, against the cold, against the idea that spiritual devotion had to be humorless, and resistance, apparently, against spoiled dairy. You sit back, smiling. Somewhere outside, the wind howls. Rain taps lightly on the old stained glass. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's the ghost of Brother Conell, warning you to check the expiration date. But you feel safe here. As strange as that sounds, surrounded by illuminated pages and the voices of monks who couldn't help but joke, even while copying divine law. The candle has burned almost to nothing. The room is dim, soft, golden. You yawn. Just a little. Because this story isn't over. You still haven't heard what happened when the weather decided to wage war on the entire monastery. The wind grows louder now. You glance at the narrow stone window, just a slit really, and see clouds churning like boiled wool over the hills beyond. The monastery groans, not in fear or pain, but in that old building way, wood creaking, stone settling, centuries breathing in and out like a tired giant. And right there, in the margin of the next folio, scrawled in a jagged, damp-looking script, someone has written, "It rains again." Of course it does. A beat, it always rains. You lean closer. The ink is blotchy, the hand unsteady. There's a faint smear at the end of the second line. Was it water? A tear, a drip from the ceiling? You half expect the manuscript itself to sigh. Irish monasteries were not known for their pleasant weather. They were known for fog, for damp robes, and for rain that fell sideways, which, as you're learning, made the work of manuscript copying just a bit more theatrical. You turn the page, and here comes the full drama. On the 7th day of rain, the firewood is gone. The goats are moist. Brother Niall has begun talking to the mold. Poor Brother Niall. You wonder how many days of whetstone and squelching sandals it takes to start confiding in the green fuzz growing on your wall. Probably not as many as you'd think. Monks weren't above sarcasm. The next margin confirms that God created the flood in 40 days. He needn't have bothered. Conant does it monthly. And under that, the chickens refuse to come out. We envy them. It's incredible, isn't it? These monks, cloistered away from the rest of the world, wrapped in itchy wool and soggy sandals, still found the energy to write weather updates like medieval weathermen with a flair for tragedy. You flip ahead. Here's an actual drawing, crude but full of intent, of what appears to be a monk holding an umbrella, made of sticks and despair. The note below reads, Brother Malachi's folly. The rain still wins. A little further along. If you read this, send dry socks. And then the piece de resistance. The scriptorium drips, the ink runs, the patience is a memory. It's almost poetic, almost. Historians argue whether these weather laments were part of a specific stormy year, or if they were just constant. Most lean toward the latter. The Irish climate in the Middle Ages was famously unforgiving, and monastic life offered no central heating, no waterproof robes, and certainly no spa days. What they had was cold stone, wet parchment, and endurance, so they coped the way many of us still do, by complaining. With wit, with irony, with style. The notes grow more dramatic as you read on. The ink froze again. I chewed the quill to soften it. I regret everything. And there are mushrooms in my sandals. I may cultivate them. You nearly laugh out loud at that one. You can't tell if it's sincere or sarcastic. But then, after 6 weeks of perpetual damp, what's the difference? The lines blur. You pause here. The manuscript page in front of you has gone brittle from age. But you can see where water once warped its surface. Centuries-old waves in the parchment, like the skin of a lake frozen mid-ripple. And yet, the writing survives. They kept going, ink frozen. They breathed warm air on the pot, parchment soggy. They dried it by the fire, probably ruining the fire. Mood low. They scribbled little jokes in the margins, hoping some future soul might find them. Smile, and remember that people have always been tired of the weather. You shift slightly, pulling your cloak or blanket tighter around you. Maybe you even imagine your own breath fogging the air, like theirs must have. Then you read this final note at the bottom of the page. If the sun returns, I shall sing. It's written in a firmer hand, a hopeful one, or maybe just one desperate, enough to believe this guy might remember how not to cry. You picture it. A warm afternoon, a rare one. The monks flooding the garden like schoolchildren, arms outstretched, chanting perhaps, or just basking, like cats. The candle beside you flutters again. Your eyelids dip, but not yet, not quite, because just as you begin to relax, you see something in the next margin. A note about a fox, a very clever one, and a missing writing tool. You smile, knowing where this is headed. The trail begins subtly, a page turned not quite cleanly, a bit of grit near the edge. And then, at the bottom of the next folio, you find it scratched hastily in a diagonal line across the margin, like someone couldn't wait for the ink to dry. The fox has stolen the quill. You pause. There's no context, no lead-in, no follow-up, just that it reads like a spy message, a code phrase. The fox has stolen the quill. You can almost imagine some candlelit conspiracy unfolding in the monastery halls. A secret order of scribes, a rogue animal with a taste for writing tools. And then you flip the page. The next margin clears it up. I saw him, orange, bold, took it in his teeth, fled west. There it is, your suspect, a red fox, possibly smug, definitely efficient, and armed at least, with a stolen goose feather sharpened for divine transcription. You grin, just imagining it. One moment, Brother Taj is carefully copying Corinthians. The next he looks up, and there, standing in the doorway like a mischievous flame, is the fox. They lock eyes, a beat passes. Then the fox bites down on the quill, turns tail, and vanishes into the underbrush like a woodland thief in a cassock of leaves. The next margin confirms it. I chased him. I failed. He is quick and unrepentant. Of course he is. He's a fox. They were worshipped in some cultures, feared in others, but in medieval Ireland, they were simply present. Clever nuisances, furred chaos, gremlins, and occasionally unwelcome. Editors. Another note, written slightly lower, reads, he took the good quill, the new one, may he be rebuked. And next to it is an attempt at a drawing, a fox, pointy and proud, carrying what appears to be an enormous feather like a royal scepter. It's not a great drawing. Honestly, it looks more like a lumpy carrot with legs, but the intent is there, and above it, he mocks me still. It's unclear whether that's meant to be literal, but you'd like to believe it is. That somewhere, in the hedges outside, the fox perched on a rock, quill dangling from his mouth, staring smugly at the monastery walls. You wonder, did the monks see this as a sign? A metaphor? A warning? One scholar, never named, once suggested it was interpreted as divine punishment, that perhaps the fox was a symbol of cunning, come to test the monk's humility. Another theory, arguably more accurate, is this: we left the door open again. That line is scratched in near the spine of the page, as if someone tried to hide it, or maybe just didn't want to deal with the consequences. It wasn't just foxes either. The margins start listing animals, like a reverse Noah's Ark of thievery and distraction. The badger chewed the vellum, the goose is back. If the sheep escapes again, I am not retrieving it. But the fox remains the most mythical, the most memorable. There's even a tiny illustrated map in one margin, showing a path out the back of the monastery, labeled his route. It ends at a suspiciously shaped bush with a question mark over it. You stare at that sketch and feel a kinship. These monks, isolated, serious, dedicated to their faith, they were also absurd, and joyful, and tired, and perfectly willing to dedicate sacred manuscript space to a fox-related mystery. Some scholars believe the fox quill story may have been retold across generations, embellished, reinterpreted. There's even speculation that later marginal doodles of foxes with tiny scrolls in their mouths were part of an inside joke, a legend born from a real incident. You turn the next page. This time, the margin is quiet. No note. Just a smudge of red-brown ink. Maybe fox fur. Maybe rust. Maybe imagination. You reach for your own pen, or if you're really committing to the bit, your metaphorical quill, and trace the error over the page. You can still see him. The thief, the rogue editor, the literary fox who wanted, apparently, to write his own chapter. And perhaps he did. Not in Latin, not in ink, but in footsteps across wet grass and stolen feathers, and the exasperated scribbles of monks who'd had exactly enough of his nonsense. One final margin, faint and sloping downward, like a whisper. He will return. I know it. And now, so, will you? Back to the candle, to the page, to the warm circle of flickering light. But we're not done, because soon, in the next section, you'll meet the tiny doodles that danced on the edge of scripture drawings of monsters, birds, and things no one could quite explain. The candle has dwindled into a puddle now, barely clinging to life. Shadows stretch long across the desk, flickering like old memories. You move closer to the manuscript, letting the low golden light warm the parchment, and there, nestled beside a column of psalms, is a tiny drawing. You squint at the night, riding a goose, holding. Is that a spoon? Yes, a spoon. You blink once, twice, waiting for it to transform into something sensible. It doesn't. You've just discovered the glorious world of doodles in the margins, the forgotten playground of medieval Irish scribes. This knight and his heroic bird are just the beginning. Over the next few pages, the margins come alive with strange creatures, absurd scenes, and monsters with expressions like disappointed ants at a village bake sale. Your finger hovers over another drawing, a man with the head of a dog, holding what appears to be a bishop's crozier. Beside him, a fish wearing a crown, and below it, a short baffling inscription: he sings beneath the sea. You don't ask questions, you simply keep reading. Because these weren't random, not really. They were the sighs and giggles of men who had spent too long writing the word begat, who had copied "Blessed are the meek" one too many times and needed just briefly to draw a horse with antlers chasing a man into a teacup. One scholar claimed these were expressions of creative fatigue. Another called them a cry for help, but cute. You tend to agree with both. But it wasn't just silliness. Some of these sketches were warnings. You turn a page and find a dark figure, hunched and wide-eyed, with elongated fingers reaching toward the text. A demon, possibly, or a scribe's rendering of the feeling when your ink bottle tips over your finished work. Beside it, in tiny letters, beware distraction, it wears many faces. Wise, a little dramatic, but wise. Then there's the frog, no context, no explanation. Just a frog, smiling. He watches. You try not to take that personally. Some doodles seem to mock the very text they surround. A solemn passage on humility is framed by stick figures juggling loaves of bread. A psalm about divine vengeance, ruined or elevated by a monk drawing what appears to be two cats sword fighting. And one of your favorites, The Lord is my shepherd, written neatly in the center, and in the margin, a sheep wearing sunglasses. Let that image sit with you. These weren't just idle sketches. In many ways, they were the earliest footnotes of feeling, of mood, of rebellion. They added humanity to the divine, imperfection to the perfect. You reach another page. Here, the drawing takes up more space than the actual text. A man appears to be turning into an owl. He's halfway through the transformation, arms mid-flap, eyes wide in either terror or joy. Next to him, scrawled in Latin, he read too much and became wise. Clever, strange, possibly autobiographical. And then comes one of the most debated drawings. A snail, a very large snail, facing off against a determined-looking monk with a broom. No explanation, just that image. Scholars still argue about its meaning. Was the snail a symbol of time, of slow spiritual growth, of passive resistance to authority? Or, and this is far more likely, was it just the scribe poking fun at the fact that sometimes life feels like you're fighting a giant snail with a stick? The truth is, no one knows. And that's part of the magic. You look again at the knight on the goose, his spoon held high, his expression noble. He isn't random, he's survival. These scribbles weren't afterthoughts. They were oxygen, a release valve, a reminder that even in the middle of copying sacred texts, someone might glance down the margin, chuckle at a dancing duck in a bishop's hat, and feel, just for a moment, alive. One final margin seals the deal. Laugh now, you must. The book is long. You smile, because it is long. Life, to dot in sometimes. A bad pen or a rainy day or a fox with a stolen quill isn't enough to ruin everything. Not if you have a good joke, a doodle, or a goose night to carry you through. The candle finally gives out, the last puff of smoke curls toward the ceiling. But your story isn't over, not yet. Because next, we'll look into a secret vice hiding in plain sight. Not wine, not bread, but beer. The scriptorium is dark now, save for the faint glow of a new candle, recently lit. It smells of beeswax and old stories. Outside, the wind howls like a restless saint, but in here, you're warm, your fingers ink-stained, and your curiosity very much alive. You're deep into the manuscript now, and the pages feel different, looser, maybe less tense. Like something secret is coming. Then you find it, tucked into the side of a dense passage on original sin. A subject that, let's be honest, pairs terribly with anything fun. Is this charming confession, ale, strong and brown, lifts the soul when Latin does not. You pause. Ale, that's not strictly canonical. You flip forward, heart suddenly a little lighter, and there it is again. God gave us barley, man made miracles. You can almost see the smirk on the scribe's face as he wrote it. Maybe he leaned in a little closer to the page, one eye on the abbot, the other on his own small act of theological mischief. Because here's the truth. No one likes to print in textbooks. Medieval monks loved their beer. They brewed it, they drank it. They praised it occasionally in ink, when no one was looking. Another note, barely legible between two careful lines of Ecclesiastes. Brother Ruaieri fell asleep in the garden. The mug was empty. The tale writes itself. And below that, let no one judge him. The day was long. You can't help it. You laugh softly. It wasn't just the drink. It was the ritual, the warmth, the rare comfort. Brewing ale gave the monks purpose, provided sustenance, and, let's be honest, made transcribing Leviticus a little more bearable. You flip another page and find a crude drawing of a barrel with legs. Yes, legs. It appears to be running. And the monk chasing it is mid-yell. The caption. It flees. As all joy does. Poetry, not far from it, is a line etched so faintly you nearly miss it. Ale is truth. Water is merely polite. There are modern brewers who would pay good money to put that on a label. Some scholars argue that monastic ale was weak, barely fermented, just a safer alternative to river water. But the margins tell a more spirited story. It was the dark ale, we knew it too late. And this gem, Brother Declan tried to debate theology with a tree. We called it even. You wonder if that debate was productive. But among the jokes there's something deeper, a kind of vulnerability, because life here was hard. It was cold, lonely, structured within an inch of itself. And the monks were expected to maintain absolute devotion, unwavering attention, and crucially quiet. But in the margins, the truth foamed up like a well-poured pint. My hand aches, my heart stirs. The ale is warm, I feel, ... human, not devout, not transcendent, just human. It's not hard to picture a small wooden cup, passed between calloused hands. A brief break from copying divine law. A moment of laughter before the next psalm. Even the mischief feels soft. The abbot did not see, but the squirrel did. You're not sure what that means, but you're glad it's there. One last note. For the evening, possibly the most relatable of all, etched into the corner in an almost wistful curl of ink. I wrote this with ale on my breath. If the letters dance, forgive me. You close your eyes. You can hear the crack of barley being crushed, the bubbling of fermentation in the cellar, the clink of mugs, the quiet chuckles shared between men who spoke little but understood each other deeply. And maybe that's the lesson of this section. That joy, in small doses, was allowed, encouraged, even, not written in bold gold leaf capitals, but gently, secretly, along the margins. The candle burns steady beside you now. The room is silent, but the monks are still whispering, and next, they'll whisper of raids of fire, and of Mondays, Viking Mondays. The air changes as you turn the page. It's subtle, like a breath held too long. The candle flickers just slightly, as if shivering at a memory, and there, along the edge of a solemn gospel passage, is a single word, written in a shaky hand. They came again. You pause, because you already know who they are. Vikings. The monks didn't write whole chapters about them. Not in the official script, too dangerous, too painful, too recent perhaps. But in the margins, in the quiet spaces between verses, that's where the truth bled through. You find another note, 2 pages later, sparse measured, Monday, always Monday. And suddenly you feel it, the exhaustion, the dread, the pattern. Viking raids were not elegant nor random. They were efficient, rhythmic, like unwanted seasons. A few more pages in, and the comments grow sharper. They burned the sheep. They did not spare the ink. That one hurts, because it's easy to imagine torches and swords. Harder to picture a lifetime of scripture gone in smoke. One monk's entire workday or work decade gone in a moment, tossed onto a fire that didn't care how beautifully the psalms were lettered. And still, they wrote, even in the aftermath. Brother Angus hid in the well. His shoes did not. That line is equal parts tragic and absurd. A perfect summary of the chaos. You flip another page and discover something darker. There's no margin note, no drawing, just a section of the manuscript where the lettering changes. It becomes slanted, frantic, as if the scribe was writing under duress or grief. Below it, someone maybe years later added this in the corner. He finished this the day after the raid, and under that, the fire reached the orchard, not the scriptorium. Dio, gracias. Gratitude, in the middle of loss. Thankfulness for parchment spared, when people were not. It's hard to sit with that. You turn the page slowly now, like the air itself is thicker. The candle's flame stutters again. Then you see it, a drawing, a Viking helmet, exaggerated, silly, tall horns, fierce eyes. Except, the monk has added flowers to the helmet, daisies, and underneath, he burned my sandals. But I like his taste in design. You exhale, a laugh, this time, small, honest, because even in pain, the monks couldn't help but observe, to comment, to critique. It's what they did. They saw, they recorded, and sometimes they made space for ridiculous beauty in the middle of ash. Another line catches your eye. They took the silver, but left the goat. Poor decision. You wonder, was that bitterness, sarcasm, a joke? Probably all three. There's even a crude map in one margin, just a squiggly coastline with a tiny line approaching. A warning, a memory, a way to make sense of something senseless. Modern scholars still debate the timeline of these raids. How many came, how often, how much damage was truly done. But here in the margins, the evidence is emotional. They remembered. We returned. The bench was gone, but the psalms were untouched. I wept. And then, finally this. Let the ink witness what the fire could not erase. You paused there, a long moment, because that's it, isn't it? That's the whole reason. The monks kept writing, why they kept adding notes in the margins, why they bothered to draw cats and foxes and Viking helmets with floral flair. Not just to remember, but to survive. The candle dips lower. You wrap your cloak tighter. The scriptorium feels quieter now, reverent but not empty, because someone somewhere once lifted a quill after a fire and wrote, "We are still here." And they were, and now, so are you. But don't go just yet, because after the raids, after the ash, came something softer, something purring. Yes, the cats are back. And this time, they brought friends. You settle deeper into your chair, or maybe it's a bench worn smooth by centuries of elbows and sighs. The candle has a warm golden heart now, steady and low. The storm outside has softened, or perhaps you've tuned it out, lulled by the rhythm of old ink and gentle memory. You turn the page, expecting more gloom, maybe another mention of the raids, but instead you find pause. Again. Yes, cats, and not just any cats. This time, they're named. You read, with a strange kind of glee, a note in careful, neat Latin. The black one knocked the inkwell again. He shows no remorse. His name is Flan. A beat later on the opposite margin, not to be confused with the striped one. That one is Sorely. He pretends to care. You smile, Sorely Flan. You picture them immediately, two furry little gremlins weaving between table legs and manuscripts, leaving smudges and chaos and exactly zero apologies. And the monks, they didn't exile them. They just adjusted the notes in these next pages read like a bizarre medieval cat diary. Sorely sat upon the Book of Kings. He has opinions. Flan brought us a bird. It was not helpful. Brother Coleman said the tabby is an omen. Then he sneezed. We remain undecided. You laugh softly, but audibly. The scribes would have approved, or at least, sighed in mutual understanding. And these weren't isolated incidents. The cats kept coming back, through the wind, through the fires, through the mildew and fasting. And endless psalms the cats remained. One note captures this perfectly. They leave, they return, as does temptation. A philosophical take. Or maybe the monk was just annoyed that his lunch went missing again. You spot another sketch. This one a tiny doodle of what might be a cat curled atop an open book. The monk has added motion lines, as if the cat is snoring. And below it, a dramatic caption, he dreams. I work, of course he does. Sorely, Flan, Penger, whoever they were, they became unofficial members of the monastic community, silent critics of divine transcription, warm footrests, distractions with whiskers. One marginal note tells a whole story in just 3 lines. The fire was warm, the page was near. Flan slept upon the Holy Spirit. You imagine the chaos, the sudden scramble, the panicked flap of robes, the soft mewl of a cat being relocated mid-nap. Another record, dry as dust but clearly emotional beneath. He tore the vellum, but he is too soft to punish, you know? That feeling, anyone who's owned a cat does. The monks weren't saints. Not in the modern sense. They had bad days. They grumbled. But they found comfort in small things. And cats were comfort. You flip ahead and find something curious. A note that breaks form, not Latin, not Old Irish, but a string of symbols, a paw print, then another, then an ink smudge in the shape of what might be a tail. And beneath that, simply he helped. That line stays with you, because even without knowing what passage Flan slept on, or what Sorely knocked over, or which gospel Penger walked across, you know what the monk meant. The cats helped. They were there when no one else was. They made the loneliness less sharp, the silence less heavy, the winters less brutal. They were, in their own way, monks too, contemplative, judgmental, occasionally violent. A few pages later, the humor returns. Today, he caught nothing. He is ashamed. And another, he judged my penmanship. I fear he is correct. But beneath the jokes, there's tenderness. You can feel it, in the gentle curve of the ink, in the care taken to record not just their names, but their personalities. Flan, the troublemaker Sorely, the liar Penger, the scholar's cat. They weren't distractions. They were companions. Symbols of persistence. Proof that even in a place dedicated to silence and sacrifice, somebody was allowed to knock over the ink and still be adored. And as you turn the last page of this section, one more line waits for you. Faint, curled, almost shy. He stayed by me all winter. That's all. No embellishment. No joke. Just a quiet truth, tucked in the margin like a secret prayer. The candle flickers gently now. Outside, the wind has slowed to a hum. You close your eyes for a moment, and you can hear a faint purr from some long-gone corner of the scriptorium. But don't sleep yet, because next, Latin puns. Yes, really. Your fingers are a little ink-stained now, or maybe you just imagine they are. Tracing along these centuries-old margins like the monks once did, eyes heavy, heart oddly light, because things are about to get ... punny. Yes, friend, this is the section where monks, otherwise known for fasting, praying, and very serious glowering, let loose with wordplay. And not just any wordplay. Latin puns. Truly, the nerdiest of jokes. Don't you turn the page and nearly miss it. The handwriting's tighter, coiled into the space between a hymn and a genealogy. But then you spot the glimmer of absurdity. Scribu, ergo sum, sonolentus. Right, therefore I am. Sleepy. You chuckle, softly. Descartes, centuries early, and significantly more, relatable. It begins there, and it spirals joyfully into full-blown marginal mischief. Another line, written with what can only be described as chaotic, monastic energy, fiat lux, but only if the sun wakes up first. Let there be light, a lovely sentiment, unless you live in Ireland, where the sun routinely ghosts the entire island. You flip again. This time, a scribe has penned a tiny dialogue between two anonymous monks. Monk 1, quid est veritas? What is truth? Monk 2, panis est bread. You laugh. Bread is truth, honestly. At least when you've been copying Leviticus since sunrise. Then there's this one, Abba Sarat Fabus, which technically means the abbot was beans. It's gibberish, but it rhymes. And maybe that was enough to make Brother Turin snort into his inkpot sometime around 873 AD. These puns weren't all word-for-word jokes. Some were visual. One margin has an O in the word dominus, turned into a little face round, surprised, judging you softly. Another scribe turned the Latin word fugio. I flee into a drawing of a man sprinting away from a lecture, with arms flailing beneath it. Lexio continua, ego non. The reading continues. I do not. You flip more quickly now, hunting for more. The monks, you realize, didn't just write in Latin, they played in it. Another margin shows a monk lying flat on his stomach, a feather quill stabbed into the parchment next to him, like a flag on Everest. Below it, Veni vidi, obdurmivi. Came, I saw, I fell asleep. Of course you did, Brother Merton. Psalms will do that to a person. Scholars have long debated whether these jokes were private amusements, or meant to be discovered later. Some even argue the monks used them to test each other, to see if future scribes were paying attention. You like that idea? The quiet wink across time, because that's what these margins are, not interruptions, but invitations. Invitations to see the people behind the pages, to know they got tired, bored, distracted, that they loved language enough to bend it into tiny jokes, while the rest of the abbey tried very hard to pretend laughter wasn't holy. Another page offers this gem. Nolite te irritari leonis, presertum celio estabas. Do not annoy the lion, especially if the lion is the abbot. You nod solemnly. That one feels like it came from experience. And then, one of your favorites, verbum Dei est lux, verbum meum est me. The word of God is light. My words are meh. Understated, accurate, a theological shrug. Even the doodles lean into the humor. Now, a cat holding a scroll that says Numentum, a bishop with bunny ears, a fish labeled Not Friday. The monks were forbidden to eat meat on Fridays. Some scholars believe this was a subtle protest, or a really dumb joke, likely both. And then you spot a scribe's confession, scrawled sideways up the gutter. I have hidden a pun on every third page. May God find them before the abbot does. You want to find them all now? Not for the theology, but for the sheer joy of discovery. of knowing someone long before your time, giggled at their own cleverness, and couldn't keep it to themselves. The final pun in this stretch is simple, quiet, written so faintly, you almost miss it. Amen. Or am I? You close your eyes. That's the beauty of these monks. Even with aching hands, stiff robes, and a mandate to copy scripture for eternity, they played. They refused to be reduced to machines. They turned Latin into a sandbox. And through it all, they invited you in, not to laugh at them, but with them. The candle burns low now, but your mind is bright, still catching echoes of jokes told in ink that outlasted empires. And next, you'll chase something even more absurd. A golden illustration of monks chasing a goose who stole a sacred page. Yes, seriously. You crack your knuckles, metaphorically, gently, and turn the page with reverence and just the tiniest smirk. Because this one glows. Literally, the page before you is illuminated, one of those masterpieces where the borders bloom with gold, vines twist like they're dancing, and the capital letters look like they were carved by angels with too much free time. But something's off. You lean in. Yes, there it is. Tucked into the bottom corner of this gilded sacred scene is a monk running after something or someone. You follow the lines. There's a second figure, not a monk, feathers, beady eyes, a long neck stretching gleefully out of the page. It's a goose holding what appears to be a page in its beak. You pause. Your brain takes a moment to catch up. Then you realize you found it. The infamous illuminated goose chase. This isn't legend, this is the truth in gold leaf. Beside the artwork, a note in precise script. He took the leaf. He ran, we pursued. He honked, and under that a second hand has added, we did not catch him. He is very fast. You laugh but softly, because clearly this was a serious incident. You turn to the next page. The illumination continues, now showing what seems to be 3 monks, armed with nets and a bucket, chasing the goose down a corridor, and above them, a Latin phrase painstakingly written in red ink, in pursuit of the unworthy scribe. Is the goose the unworthy scribe, or did it simply act as one? You'll never know. What you do know is this: geese were common in Irish monasteries, kept for meat, for eggs, occasionally for feathers, and apparently, for stealing precious scripture when no one was looking. Another margin note provides more context or more confusion. It was the Psalms. The good ones. Which ones are the good Psalms? Again unclear. What is clear is the indignation. He aimed for the window. Brother Dathy blocked him with a curtain. The curtain is lost. Not torn, not burned. Lost goose physics. The drawings become more ridiculous. On one page, the goose appears to be reading the stolen manuscript. On another, it's perched like a scholar at a lectern, beak open, possibly mid-chant beside it. Mockery, pure mockery. You can't breathe. It's perfect. The monks didn't just witness the absurd, they committed it to history with solemn ink and serious flourishes. These were men who spent 10 hours a day bent over parchment, and when the world slipped into farce, they didn't flinch. They documented it. Another entry, the page was recovered, slightly damp, still holy. You wonder what that recovery looked like. Did someone barter for it? Offer the goose a trade? A less sacred page, a piece of oatcake? We'll never know. But the final image tells you everything you need. It's a full page. Illumination astonishingly detailed. The monks stand triumphant, surrounding the goose, who is now sitting peacefully, haloed in gold. The stolen page resting at its webbed feet. And underneath, he has repented. For now, you lean back. You stare at it, and then you realize they weren't just making a joke. They were making a myth. In a world full of war, cold and strict obedience, they allowed themselves a moment of nonsense, and they enshrined it. This is medieval comedy. This is trauma therapy via goose. This is history, not written by victors, but by exhausted scribes who desperately needed something to believe in that wasn't doom, discipline, or damp socks. So they gave the goose a story. They gave themselves a laugh, and they made it beautiful. One final margin note before the section ends. Barely visible beneath the tail feathers of the triumphant bird. He is still watching me. He not learned to write. Too late perhaps, because you're reading this centuries later. and you've just spent an entire section being told about a goose who committed grand theft. Scripture, take a breath, drink something warm, because next, we'll return to the monk's very real, very itchy, and utterly unwelcome roommates, fleas. The goose is gone now, off to some medieval legendarium of its own, and you turn the next page expecting a return to solemnity, to silence, maybe to something pious and perfumed. Instead, you get this, I itch, just that 2 words, scrawled in the tightest, most desperate little script you've seen yet. You pause. Then, just below it, they bite, they leap, they laugh, and suddenly you know exactly who they are, fleas the eternal, unwelcome guests of the Middle Ages, and yes, even in sacred halls, among scrolls and scripture and solemn chanting. They thrived. You flip the page and find a scribble of something monstrous. A round body, 6 legs, 2 antennae, and the kind of angry eyebrows normally reserved for depictions of Satan. The caption, "This is what attacked me as I wrote," Luke 12, a medieval flea mugshot, complete with horns and what appears to be a little crown, probably symbolic. Hopefully you glance at the surrounding text. It's a beautiful passage, wholly illuminated, and in the margin, a note that reads, "I killed one. There are 17 more. This is war." You nearly drop the manuscript from laughing. This is history as it really was. Not gold-trimmed and serene, itchy, distracted, and just slightly homicidal. If the victims were small, many-legged and probably living in your sleeves, another page, another lament. They favor the wrists, treacherous little beasts, and Then, Brother Brendan claims he is immune. I suspect sorcery. Poor Brother Brendan, always slightly too clean, probably always slightly too smug. Fleas were more than a nuisance. They were a fact of life. No matter how many robes you wore, how many layers of wool you wrapped around yourself, they'd find a way. Some monks tried herbs, others swore by ash. A few just gave up and scratched, spiritually and literally. One particularly memorable, marginal note, "I tried holy water. They grew stronger." Another scribe offers a strategy. "I will shave my legs. I am out of options." You appreciate the honesty and the desperation. The best, though the absolute best, is a long, scrolling line of dialogue, like a personal journal kept during battle. "One is on my neck. I write faster. Perhaps I outrun it. I flicked it. It landed in the Psalms, divine judgment perhaps. It returns. I surrender." At the bottom, a single word, all caps, bold, WHY. It's not just funny, it's so human. You know this feeling. Maybe not fleas, hopefully, but something. That moment where the task is too long, your body is too tired, and some tiny, ridiculous discomfort tips you over the edge. The monks didn't whine in the main text. Oh no, there they stayed stoic, devoted, disciplined. But in the margins, they lost it, and in losing it they found us centuries later, laughing, nodding, feeling seen. A few pages later, there's a tiny illustration. A monk, robes hiked up to his knees, standing beside what appears to be a bonfire. The caption, "I burn my habit. The fleas may keep the ashes." Dramatic, understandable. There's even a tiny poem. They crawl, they hide, in cloth and skin. I write, I cry, they always win. You whisper an amen you didn't know you had. The final flea entry in this section is just tired, scrawled sideways, as if the monk couldn't even bother to rotate the page. God made all creatures. This one was a mistake. You close the manuscript softly. The candle is short now, flame steady but small. The wind outside is soft again, less howl, more whisper. The monks still scratching probably, but they kept writing. And next we'll read the most relatable line yet, a prayer not for wisdom or strength, but for a nap. The candle is near its end now, a little pool of wax clinging to the base, flickering gently like it knows the finish line is in sight. You shift slightly, your back aching like a scribe, 3 hours into a psalter. The room feels still, and the page in front of you, it breathes with longing, not for salvation, not for understanding, not for divine vision, but for sleep. You spot the line right away, barely inked, squeezed between a verse about eternal vigilance and a footnote on ecclesiastical hierarchy. "Oh Lord, grant me a nap between the lines." You pause, blink, and then you exhale deeply because that's you. That's all of us. That's a monk in a wool robe, hunched over the 8th hour of transcription, eyes set and papered, writing through sheer divine caffeine, which in this case was probably barley ale and stubbornness. And he just wants a nap. You turn the page. The requests grow bolder. Let this be a holy pause. Just 10 minutes. I will not even snore. And then, the spirit is willing, but the eyes are closed. Same energy, different century. There's a whole stretch of text where the script noticeably wobbles, as if the scribe's hand was fighting to stay upright. And in the margin, his confession. "This is the 4th time I've copied this verse. I keep waking at the end." You gently place your finger on the spot, almost as if to say, "Same brother." The scriptorium wasn't built for comfort. No pillows, no plush chairs, no ergonomic backrests, just wood, stone, wind, and rules. But the monks found a way to rebel, softly, quietly, marginally. Another line, this one barely a whisper. "They think I pray. I am horizontal." That one gets you. You picture it perfectly. A monk, kneeling in his stall, head bowed in contemplation, but really, fully gone mid-snore, possibly dreaming about goats that can transcribe themselves. You find a sketch, a tiny doodle of a monk, curled like a cat beneath his desk, a blanket over his shoulders, or maybe it's a stolen tablecloth, mouth open above him. Do not wake unless the Viking is inside. Practical advice. Some entries get philosophical, one written in a gorgeous hand, careful, practiced. Deliberate reads to sleep is to trust that the world may turn without you. You close your eyes briefly, let that one settle, then you turn the page and find its polar opposite. "I tried to nap. I was kicked." This is oppression. You laugh, out loud this time. It echoes softly in the stillness. You reach a note written in the space where the text should be. A full line missing, and in its place, "I fell asleep on this sentence." You finish it. You stare at it for a moment, unsure if you should laugh again, or just applaud, because it's bold, honest, and perfectly in keeping with the theme of this entire manuscript, real life bleeding into holy work. The divine made marginally human. Another note likely from a fellow monk. "Brother Cormac drooled here." Indeed, the vellum is puckered. A stain, long since faded, still interrupts the rhythm of the letters. A sleep offering, a relic of exhaustion. And then this gem. "I woke. I saw what I had written. I do not understand it. Perhaps it was meant for angels." You don't know what he wrote, but you believe him. This isn't laziness. This is survival. When your days are dictated by bells, prayers, meals of cold mush, and copying thousands of words by hand, a nap isn't indulgence, it's resistance. The final margin note in this section is tender, simple, not funny, not sarcastic, just this: "I slept. It helped." And you feel that deep in your bones, because sometimes the holiest act isn't completion or endurance, it's rest. The kind that restores you just enough to turn one more page. Speaking of theirs, only one section left now. The ink is running dry for them, for you, for all of this. But stay, because in the final chapter, you'll read the words of a monk who knew the end was near, and what he wrote. He wrote for you. The final page waits for you, not in a dramatic way. There's no trumpet, no curtain fall, no grand flourish of medieval ink. Just a page, quiet, worn smooth at the corner where someone, centuries ago, turned it with fingers, a little ink stain, a little trembling. The candle is nothing now but a stub. You lean in, your breath barely there, as if afraid it might blow the story away. And then you see it, a single line, written in the steadiest hand of all. This is the last leaf. No drama, no sighing, no finesse in gold. Just calm awareness. Just closure. You turn the page anyway, and it's still there. A little more text, a little more breath. The monk, whoever he was, kept writing. My eyes dim, my hand forgets its shape. You feel it in your own fingers. You've sat with him long enough now to imagine the ache, the slow, creeping numbness in the wrist, the spine bent into a question mark. He's not complaining, he's observing, recording even this, But this ink is mine, and you read it, so I am not lost. You swallow not sadness, something gentler. A slow realization that time folds strangely in these margins. That what one man wrote in the corner of a cold stone room 1,000 years ago is now inside your head. That he wrote with no idea of you, and yet, maybe, he did. A few lines further, his words soften more. The candle is small now, it flickers as I do. But I have written what I could. There's no arrogance in it, no claim of greatness. He doesn't call himself a historian. He doesn't even name himself. He's just a presence, quiet, constant, like the sound of ink being drawn from a bottle. If you laugh, I have done well. If you feel, I have done better. If you sleep, a pause in the line. And then I forgive you. You do smile at that, eyes misty, chest warm. The margin beside this final passage is nearly blank, except for one small, off-center doodle, a simple spiral, looping inward, tighter and tighter, until it disappears in a single dark dot, a symbol, a distraction, maybe just a moment of meditation etched in ink. And below it, one last line, I have left the pen. You close the book, slowly, not literally, perhaps, but the story ends here. Not with a bang, not even a whisper. Just with the sense of something placed down gently. A life lived, a line finished. The monks are silent now. No more puns, no cats, no fleas, no cheeky geese. Just soft pages and a trace of warmth in the space where the candle burned. You lean back, let your breathing slow. Let the stillness wrap itself around you. This wasn't a story about battles, kings, or empires. It was about small lives written in the corners. About the spaces between the sacred, about men who copied God's word by day and doodled goose chases by night. They left their humor, their exhaustion, their itches, their naps, and their truth in ink. In Latin. In whispers, and you found them, you centuries later, in the dark, with your own kind of candle glowing in a modern room. You read their margins, and for a little while, they were alive again. So let your eyes close now. Let the flicker in your mind dim like their last flame. You've read enough, you've smiled enough, you've made it to the end, and now, drift.